Hi, I'm Adam Gustafson, the illustrator of Margaret Muirhead's new book, Flip, How the Frisbee Took Flight. It's the story of a plucky inventor named Fred Morrison and his wife and business partner, Lou. But it's also a story about how ideas work and how the same ideas can pop up in different places at different times and in some pretty surprising ways. So it's also about history. It's about the age-old pastime of throwing stuff to see what happens, and maybe even a few UFO sightings. So much happens within Fred's lifetime that it's the job of the author and the illustrator to weave it all together into one single story. The illustrations, for their part, often have the job of filling in gaps. And by gaps, I mean the faces, the places, the weather, things that a reader probably won't notice in a lot of cases, and in some cases may never have even thought of. So for a glimpse of what goes on into creating this fleshed out world, let's take a look at the scene early on where Fred and Lou are tossing around a popcorn tin. The first thing the publisher gets to see is what we call a thumbnail sketch. I like to think these are called thumbnails because they're small, but they're not tiny. They're little rough draft scribbly drawings of what the artist thinks the book will look like. If they're drawn small, it won't take someone like me forever to tell if we have a good or a bad idea. So I tend to draw mine about half the size of the proposed book. So who's in the picture? Do we know what house these characters grew up in? At least what part of town? And how did California kids dress during the 1930s? What's November weather like in LA? What color would the lid of a popcorn tin be? In order to draw these things, we have to know what they look like. I used census records, old photos of Los Angeles, Google Street View, fashion catalogs, eBay listings, to figure out what my props and settings and costumes would look like, and I took lots of embarrassing photos of myself throwing imaginary frisbees. All of this work leads to a tight sketch, we would say, which is intended to look like the final painting but without color. This is our last chance to go back and forth, the publisher and the artist, deciding if everything looks and feels right. After this, the painting can begin. The art for Flip was painted in gouache. It is an opaque watercolor, so you can't see through it very well. And I painted on big sheets of a fancy Italian watercolor paper. These paintings are scanned into a computer where they're resized to the exact measurements of the book, or a 1/4 inch larger if the picture goes off the edge of the page. The computer file of the art consists of 300 pixels for every inch across the final painting, and this is the process for every single picture. The illustrations for Flip took about a year to finish, from the thumbnails to the paintings. The challenge is to spend a year making something that feels like a single story, or can be read and feel like a single experience. Sometimes by the time October comes around, I have trouble remembering what I was thinking in January. That's another reason I make my sketches so detailed. So I hope you like the book. All the work that went into it is really just the start. What happens after it's published, how many people read it, and let it linger in their imaginations, that's really the most important part. It gives life to the efforts of the author, the illustrator, all our editors and our art directors and our designers, everyone else who is involved in the process of creating and publishing the book. So for that, thank you.